Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Splash Play, the fantasy football podcast for every game under the sun. And today it's me, Chris Spags, without Pete Overzet. So I'm digging deep to get into my roster of top DFS players. That means I'm bringing on Rayen Patnaik, of course, one of my friends from Stokastic, one of the top DFS players in the world, whose name I probably butchered, even though I've known him for years. But we're going to do that. We're going to talk about DFS lineups. We're going to talk about NFL DFS Week 1 and how to optimize and make better lineups across the board right after this intro. Hello, everyone. It's a special Wednesday edition of Splash Play here, where hopefully we'll get some people tuning in. But once again, I'm Chris Spags, again, joined by Rayen, better known as RynPak, a guy you've seen, I'm sure, soaring past you in DFS tournaments out there. Rayen, how are you doing? How is life as one of the top players in the world who's, I feel like, in between your favorite sports right now?
Yeah, no, the summer is always an interesting time. Sometimes you dabble in it, some MLB, sometimes you take some time off. It's been more of a time off summer for me, just to enjoy the warm weather. I spent majority of it in Chicago. Now I'm spending week 1 in Michigan just because I had majority of my setup here. So it's fun. I mean, week 1 NFL, there's nothing like it. It's probably the most exciting NFL DFS of the weekend by a long shot, just because of the volume you can enter, the price pools up top, and you're just hoping one lineup just creeps up to the top. But as always, NBA is my baby. I'm always looking forward to the NBA season, but at least the first 4 weeks of NFL, it's fun to wake up and grind that out.
We're going to talk a lot about this NFL Week 1 stuff. I got the ownership projections from Stokastic, of course, my former employers. Good, really one of the best sites out there you can be following. So make sure you are checking out stokastic.com, Stokastic.com. Go over there right now and check out the projections, of course, by the top DFS player, Osmo, along with a great team of guys like Rayen, who are just very sharp and really better at this than I have any right to be overall. But make sure you guys, if you're watching live, hit the like button. Of course, shout out to the chat as well. I see some great names in here, some of our regulars, Rayen, where, we're rebuilding the Splash Play channel. We're really building it up here. So we got to give the shout outs to guys like Dylan saying good morning, GM Spags, Nick. We got Stokastic in here itself. I feel like that's probably Nick on the handle, right?
Probably Nick Lepre. Probably Lepre.
Yeah, Nick, of course, one of the best ball guys out there who I like. Nick's going to have to adjust now, Rayen, because I know you were dabbling best ball a little bit. You were starting to, not probably more than a little bit, I'll say. But I know we had talked at one point in the offseason where you were doing some best ball drafts and really getting crazy with your exposures. And I wanted to have you on the show to talk with Pete about it because, Pete's the guy who's taught me a lot of the stuff about, my best ball process that hopefully made me better at it. We'll see how those lineups go on Underdog and DraftKings this year. But you did some crazy things out there that I just want to give you the floor to talk about how you viewed best ball, because you are one of the sharpest game theory guys I know when it comes to DFS. But best ball is a whole different ball of wax that I felt like overall just a less sharp industry, besides people who, of course, are in our chat.
Yeah, no, this was my first true exposure to NFL best ball. I've had some success with NBA best ball. DraftKings had run a second half only NBA best ball, I want to say, not this previous season, but 2 seasons ago, which I ended up having a couple just get into the finals. There's also a ton of overlay then, so I probably a little bit lucky then. I just wanted to dabble because I was not playing much MLB, and I was like, okay, let's just try this out. Let's see this underdog. Underdog as a business is just booming. So I was like, all right, let's go see what's happening over there. Now I just got a little crazy with it, maybe a little too crazy looking back at it, just because of value-based drafting is probably the best way to attack any sort of fantasy football draft from a simple perspective. I was just onslaughting teams that I thought could take me to the top. The 3 teams that I was consistently onslaughting were the Chiefs and the Giants were the 2. And then I would get the back half of the Colts minus Pittman and Taylor. I would get their team. The reason why I was doing this is I just wanted to try this out and just see how it goes. And then I just saw people in other Discords saying, oh my God, I need to try this out. That's when I felt like I had to speak up and let people know this is a very crazy take. I do not think this is by any means optimal because I didn't want people to spend their hard-earned money on such a crazy degenerate approach that I was going upon it. So we'll see how it works out.
Do you want to share some? I got to give a shout, by the way. We got a super chat here from our guy, Max with 2 X's, which makes him the coolest Max I know. Thank you for supporting the channel as well as the show here. But I got to ask you, though, so you're talking about some of your strategy. And one of the things that jumped out to me, which I talked about on some of my Friday solo streams, was that I really felt like the one thing people do in DFS they don't do in best ball is sort of leveraging against other people's failure and trying to take, this guy who's going to be so highly owned. What if he doesn't go well? How does that process go? That results in somebody else either bubbling up or a different direction or all that. And I feel like, for me, what you talked about with the Colts was something I was doing, certainly taking a little more Pittman, but I love Alec Pierce, love Naheem Hines. Naheem Hines is, I think, my highest exposed running back in my final underdog exposures. But it's something to me where, like, if everybody in the world has Jonathan Taylor at the highest possible draft capital, I felt like just trying to take the ways that he could not get there, which to me means losing some goal line touches, losing some of the easy touchdowns he got last year. Maybe he doesn't break the long runs. You see more Hines, see more Pittman, see more Pierce, even Mo Alley Cox. But overall, like, I just thought that was how to approach this, from what I saw last year for some of my lineups. Was that the same thought process for you, or is there any sort of game theory optimal to try to adhere to for best ball?
So I guess the game theory optimal would be a tough term to say. I just wanted to get exposure to all the Chiefs just because I had them projected as the highest scoring offense at the end of week 17. I think they would score offensively the most points in the league. And I was like, hey, I just want all their points. I just want to see how this goes. That gives me a strong floor. And then with the Giants, I did that. And then also all the week 17 bros are going to love this. The Colts and the Giants play week 17. So I was like, all right, let's just run some correlation. And I could get Matt Ryan, Naheem Hines. I got Paris Campbell, Alec Pierce, and Mo Alley Cox. And for 60 of my best ball mania teams, that's what it looks like. And then I had to, unfortunately, underdog is not legal in Michigan. I came back to Michigan. So I had to rip off 90 drafts like within like a 6-hour layover or a 6-hour flight delay in Chicago Midway, just using like ranking. So just to get the volume in. But looking back at it, I definitely would never advocate to do that. I just want to see how it goes. I just like Patrick Mahomes as a fan standpoint of view. And then I changed things up for DraftKings a little bit. I just went pure value based. And I did get a correlation in my stacks with my heaviest owned stacks is probably Carson Wentz and McLaurin on DK, and then Deshaun Watson, Damari Cooper towards the end. The reason why I did this was I'm hoping Carson Wentz, I think per Mike Clay's strength of schedule model, Carson Wentz has the easiest strength of schedule this year. And as gross as it sounds, I think Wentz can be okay. And then Wentz has a week 14 bye. Deshaun Watson comes back week 13. So I'm just hoping that a lot of my teams are just two QB, and it's a lot of Wentz and Watson. And I made a hard stance. It kind of goes against the diversification of like a lot of people are diversifying, which is completely fine. I personally like to make some hard stands. Yes, I know when I lose, I will probably lose big, but I do think if things work out, I put myself in a position to win bigger. So that's why I'm making such aggressive stands.
So I'm going to ask you some more best ball questions, guys. If you are just clicking the thumbnail and wondering how to build some better week 1 NFL DFS lineups, we are going to get into that. We're going to hop into the fantasy cruncher and actually look through the optimization stuff, because as I tweeted out today, I just want Ryan to save me from myself because I'm maxing out the Millie Maker this week. It's $5. I could find the time and the effort to do that. But we want to talk some more about best ball because I'm curious your thoughts about how this overall industry approaches, because, Pete and I, and Pete certainly, leading the cavalry for everybody talking about week 17 correlations. The main things for me that I was trying to adhere to are the week 17 correlations, the double stacks overall with my QB. And then I also did play a lot with RotoViz's Roster Construction Explorer, trying to figure out what the ideal pockets have been since 2015 of when to draft QBs, when to draft a tight end. And as a result, I took a lot of elite tight ends, a lot of semi-elite QBs, and also went very aggressively zero RB. Was there anything you heard throughout this industry process where I know you were on our stream? I'm sure you're watching some of the Stokastic ones and other ones out there. Was there anything you heard where you're like, that seems wrong, but they're treating this like it's right?
So at first, when I heard everyone just stacking the shit out of week 17, I'm like, damn, what happens if your team just sucks from week 1 through 15? Like, it's not going to matter, right? So I do think people can make arguments either way. I know Alex had a very comprehensive and very soundful article with week 16 with such variance so high in fantasy football. And I think a lot of like the street people who are just making lineups on the street, they probably don't understand variance to the level as like we do. And I think it's pretty important to know that like Jonathan Taylor could sprain his ankle week 1 and be out for the next 10 weeks. And that just changes up the whole draft. And there's no waivers in best ball. So it's like a very different approach. You can't approach best ball like season long, where in season long, you can take some risk, like extreme risks, and like hopefully the waiver wire pans out. Same with best ball towards the end of the draft. But it's so like, once you're done, you're done. There's nothing else you can really do. And what comes out to like what sounds wrong to me is I I do think you can get away without week 17 correlation. Like I don't think it's a must. Like at what part how much are you correlating? Like are you correlating the whole offenses back and forth? Are you correlating like one player? Like I don't know where you draw the line with the week 17 correlation. So I think once we get more data, like we only have 2 season worth of data. At one point, I thought it's the best thing to like draft at the end of like best ball, like the end of the best ball's calendar. Like so, like this week would be the best way. But there was data last year; it didn't matter when you drafted. So I don't know. I mean, I think the more data we get, the more better basketball players we become. That's what's happened with DFS. That's happened with so many different games along like the last 10 years. So I don't know what it is. Like next year it might be like divisional correlations because majority of your players play against each other. I don't know.
Mhm. I was thinking that might be a thing this year where we did take some AFC West heavy teams on these streams with Pete, and I think that's one that I love that division. Obviously, elite quarterback play, some different guys you can get to, different ADPs that stood out to me. My one thing that jumped out to me with best ball, and this is part of why I was so heavily invested this year, both in terms of the content workflow as well as like my actual money. Like I've always been reluctant to play MLB DFS too heavy. Like I would do it. I love covering it. Like I loved covering it when I was at Osmo. But I think for me, like it's not my favorite sport. I'd rather spend my money on NFL, rather spend my money on NBA. But the one thing that jumped out to me with best ball is like, I don't feel like best ball has been figured out to the extent that DFS has, where like, I think in the next few years, you might see a best ball optimizer that comes out. You might see some, whether it be, through a fantasy cruncher or a spike week or one of these other sites out there that are trying to make tools. But I also feel like best ball, like it's this weird thing where people get caught in the redraft kind of psychology, the season-long psychology that they've played since they were kids. And I think people are like obsessed with running backs, obsessed with certain constructions. And it's like, no, just if you do some things that are a little bit different, if you're willing to get uncomfortable, you might have the biggest gains this year. Is that something you're seeing as somebody who I feel like in terms of people I know, you've probably spent as much on DFS as anybody out there. Do you feel like that's where best ball is going with, the underdog valuation soaring and is people's interest in it really being sky high?
Yeah, I do think people will get more and more sound. And one thing it'd be interesting to check. I know like there's week to week best ball, and like I don't know if we can derive data based on that to make us better season long best ball players by any means. Like every week, like underdog has their best ball contest like for week one. Like so maybe that's something that we need to look into a bit more, like how like that's working out, what roster constructions are doing better there. And then maybe we get more of a slate sample size. But I do think with the more data we get, the more better people are gonna just get. That's just like how the world is operating at this level. Like the more data you have to analyze, the better decisions you're gonna make. And I think it's not going to be immediate. I do think maybe let's say we're having this conversation 3 best ball seasons from now. I hope we're better best ball players, and I think we'll have more data to look upon. And maybe we're going to look back and laugh at it. Oh my God, week 17, what a joke of a build. And then because back in the day, DFS people would like have rules saying, oh, you must play 3 running backs in DraftKings builds. And now as the NFL has operated passing heavy, no one's really saying that. You can easily put a wide receiver, and wide receiver ceilings are arguably much higher nowadays. So things will change, and like the sport will change. And I do think I do think the safest approach is just taking the best player on the board, and should pan out more times than not with the competition we're going against. Now, is that going to put you in the ceiling to win that $2 million top prize day in and day out? Probably not. You probably need to make some reaches and probably need to take some risks towards the end. And you need the variance to work in your favor to really end up at the top and have that one lineup.
Yeah, and the variance has to work in your favor over the course of an entire season. And like you talked about, you have to get lucky as well with the avoiding the injuries, avoiding the key injuries. And if you do lose a guy, you want to lose somebody that hopefully can get the production made up in another facet of your draft. But I think too, one of my biggest fears, especially with DraftKings, is that somebody out there just got the most loaded super team, and not like through collusion or anything, not through a classic bachelor scenario where they're both teaming up to get it, but more like just because they were such bad rooms, like such not sharp rooms, especially May, June, that like I didn't start drafting on DraftKings, I think, until end of May. And I think I already saw that there were some really soft lineups there. And I'm sure they were even soft before the ADP stabilized. So it's possible that there's just a super team or 100 out there that are just like guys that shouldn't have gone, like Justin Jefferson in the second round and Chase in the first round, like late first round. Like that's the kind of thing that I think could exist out there. And that's sort of my fear of best ball, is that you could be as sharp as possible. You could make the best constructions, but ultimately you might be victim to just a bad room and somebody getting lucky from that.
For sure. And funny you said that. I got an email from Underdog, I think 2 nights ago, saying, one of your leagues has been canceled due to collusion. So someone was colluding in a draft I was in. So I only have 149 entries, and I don't have the ability to enter my 150th one. So I'm disappointed. If that was the one that was going to win me the 2 million, I'm very disappointed. But
are you team that like maxing it out was the plus EV move? Because Pete pushed back on me on that, saying that like you didn't have to do it. I really felt like for like a puppy, maybe not, but Best Ball Mania, if you could do it, like I was dead set on getting my 150. And same thing with DraftKings, I ended up getting 148. But like I really think that's an important thing that I know I learned from Alex at Osmo, of course, Osmo himself, many years ago, that like you're inherently at a disadvantage in any DFS tournament when you aren't maxing it out relative to everybody else. Do you feel that way for Best Ball, or do you think there's a little more room to play 50 entries and still have a shot?
You certainly have a shot at 50 entries. I think it's much greater if you have 150. So yeah, I'm more in Alex's boat. And it's also like you got to know what your goals are. With like you got to know like you got to have some sort of perspective or realistic expectations with whatever basketball bankroll you have. It's really hard to come. It's like it still is really hard. Like 2 teams only advance, and then the 1 team advances. It's just like there's so many hurdles to get you to that final round. It is kind of a lottery ticket, but if you have the sound decisions put in place, and going back to what you said of like softer rooms and like ADP rising and stuff like that, the one thing if you're grinding out NFL year long, because that's the one sport people are grinding out year long constantly on a whole nother level, especially fantasy football. If you can expose rankings like Fantasy Pros' rankings, if you expose these popular ranking sources with something that I think you have an advantage. So I think last year a lot of people were able to get Cooper Kupp at a great discount just because of the Matthew Stafford upgrade from Jared Goff. Obviously, that's easy to say when Cooper Kupp just has one of the greatest all-time receiving seasons. But if you're able to find, you can be very like value-based ranking and just have those 1 or 2 guys you're a bit heavier on, and I think you will set yourself apart. I don't think you need to be too crazy to win the Best Ball Mania. And you'll look at the team at the end of the year and you'll be like, oh, that makes sense. And like, it won't be that crazy of a team that ends up winning it, in my opinion.
Unless it's one of mine, then it'll be completely unhinged and have no running backs in the first 10 rounds. And we're all going to have a great time celebrating that going. Shout out to the chat, by the way, as well. If you guys are new around here, I think it's a lot of the regulars currently, but make sure you are subscribed to the Splash Play channel. Brandon over here moving from the Swolecast to Splash Play. I appreciate that as well. Of course, Pete's in Vegas this week, so the Friday show will be me and my my current pal / former frequent co-host as well at Stokastic. Eric Lindquist will be joining me. So this week, in a lot of these Splash Play shows we're going to have coming up here, we're dipping into the Spags Rolodex. The Pete Rolodex is going to be its own thing. We'll have those on Fridays still, but prepare to see more different streams on here, different kinds of content. We'll still do the hijinks on the flagship show with me and Pete once a week, but prepare for some changes around here just as we try to get more really heavier and hopefully make me a better player. Also, Historical Anomalies asking about the flooding, which I was catching Ryan up on right before the show. The flooding has been cleared out. It was only a couple inches, but now we have fans down there and a dehumidifier, I guess, running to remove the stuff. And then we have to file insurance things. So my studio, Ryan, is going to be unavailable for a while. And as you know, in a man who's always broadcasting from your comfy space, the nice big theater setup there, it's tough to lose your studio when you're a content creator and you have it just the way you want it. And now I'm in the guest room here and I feel completely naked here to do the content that we have to do heading into the NFL season.
Yeah, no, that's how I feel too. That's another reason why I just came back to this setup. It's just like I did a show in my the apartment rental I had in Chicago. I was like, this does not feel like normal because I have a different streaming laptop than I have like my own laptop. Just to like, it's just like the setup. It's just like the content thing. Like you have your setup, you feel comfortable in your setup, and if it gets a little unhinged, it just puts you in a bad mood.
It's true. And so I'm in a bad mood perpetually this week, guys. So make sure you smash the like button here and, of course, subscribe. Make sure to follow at RynPak as well and follow me at Chris Spags and follow at Splash Play Pod because, again, we're going to be playing with the show schedule, including on Fridays. That show, the flagship show, the Ride or Die Pick show on Fridays will be at 10 a.m. Eastern moving forward. So stay tuned for that and keep your eyes peeled, again, this Friday for me and Eric Lindquist. Ryan, I want to talk about some of the NFL DFS stuff we teased out here because that's what people are here for. And I really, for me, this is important to kind of have you on because I think with best ball, like, part of what I like that we did, the best ball drafts all year long was that we, as unlike some other best ball streams out there, like Pete and I play NFL DFS regularly. I'm obsessed with it. I know a lot of people, sometimes are a little bit leery about it. And you have been out in the streets, playing a lot of money weekly for a couple years now, from what I know, probably more than a couple. And I feel like it's one of those things where it can be scary. I don't think it's as safe of a place. It's not as welcoming of a community, quite frankly, as best ball is, but it is still, big money weekly. This week on DraftKings, I talked about, I'm going to max that Millie Maker, $5, 150 max on there. So not a crazy entry fee for $1 million prize pool, but you're competing against, 1.4 million people, I believe, in that one, or 1.2 million, something like that. A large, really field there of people who are going to do, plus EV approaches that are going to really optimize well, that are going to play ownership spectacularly, and also people that are just going to do fucking insane things because they're playing because they remember the ads from 2 summers ago, and they're going to hop in and maybe even win it somehow. So how do you handle that kind of tournament in an overall approach? Like, is there anything you're doing on a baseline level that you give to people out there to make them feel like they at least have some sliver of an edge?
Play the best players. Just kidding. No, week 1 is always an interesting beast because of how big that Millie Maker prize pool is. 2 years ago, I got absolutely smoked week 1. Last year, week 1 was one of my better NFL DFS weeks I've ever had. And then I got smoked from weeks 2 through 17. So NFL is always a own beast in its own right.
So overall, like relative to a week 1 slate, and it's something that I remember from NFL week 1 generally, and I think I've probably said on content over the last few years, but it feels like the edge for the NFL, if you do have that information knowledge base and you have good projections, and of course I would advocate for the Stokastic ones. They're going to be the ones that I'm rolling out this week because I did not get to enhance mine for this year in the way I would have liked to. But Stokastic's projections were the ones that I go with. I know people use ETRs out there. We have some at Football Outsiders as well. If you want to go to footballoutsiders.com/subscribe, really, in a perfect world, I would say blending a bunch of them together might be the way to do it. But overall, is there anything that you feel like are traps for week 1 through 3, let's say, where there is that less information, there isn't as projectable of an outlook on this year? Is there anything you're seeing, guys moving teams? Obviously, a lot of quarterback changes, wide receiver changes this year. Like, is there anything that you're watching out for that people might flock towards, but you're actively running away from?
Looking into week 1, so one thing this year, week 1, there's a lot of like uncertainty with injury in some wide receiver rooms. The Packers with Allen Lazard, the Giants all offseason long. Those are the first 2 that come to mind. We don't have to worry about Tampa Bay. They're that Sunday night game. But this year, I tend to, for any NFL, and looking into my NFL process, I wait for that Friday injury report to start like looking at, okay, what players am I going to look at? I tend to work with a much smaller quarterback pool, kind of like making aggressive stance. It does burn me when I do lose, but when I have won, it has worked out well for me. First, I'll look at, okay, what are the matchups and what are the Vegas totals first? See like where the points are going to come at. What players I can narrow down from there and kind of go from like a tournament perspective, look at like what ownership sticks out. Like, for example, the always common ownership disparities like Metcalf and Lockett. Why is Metcalf projected to be twice as owned as Lockett in a previous year Russell Wilson stack? How can I differentiate stacks that are going to be popular but still get exposure to that stack? Like commonly last year was the Dak Prescott double stack with Lamb and Cooper and Schultz. How can I still get exposure to Dak, but is the pairing of Lamb and Schultz going to be more popular, or the combination of Cooper and Schultz, where I can still argue maybe I get less targets, but my upsides are very similar. They're going to be on the field a similar amount. So I try to like narrow down options where I have, or in high scoring offenses and good game scripts where I can be like, okay, this is still popular, but rightfully so, but I can still get different, not only in my stack, but in secondary, like the secondary roster build. Is it a bring back? Is it a double bring back? Or do I like target other high scoring games in that environment as well? So there's a lot that goes into it. Now, if you're building a cash game build, week 1 is probably the best way if you're just going to roll out the Stokastic Optimal and you just fish out the non-badges on DraftKings and FanDuel, I think you'll do pretty well. I mean, unless you get screwed over with some bad injuries, I think more times than not, if you can fish out the newbies, and as I think Adam Levitan calls them the toilet shitters, and you can definitely find yourself a profit, which is a very good way to start your week 1, regardless of not maxing a massive Millie Maker as well.
So you mentioned the double stacks, and we're going to hop into the optimizer in a second here. And again, I'll show you guys the whole process on the screen so you can kind of see what it looks like if you haven't played NFL DFS. And I'm going to pull the projections from Osmo and put them on the Fantasy Cruncher and go from there. But is there anything you're doing on a rule level and exposure level that you do every time out? Like, how do you approach that stuff? Because honestly, for me, like that's been my weakest spot over the course of time where I had the NBA DFS wins that we talked about on this show and like had a nice run there. And part of what got me there was that I used an Excel spreadsheet, sorted out 1,000 lineups and then had it work out. And that, didn't pan out every time, but that was what got me my big wins. Is there anything you're doing on Fantasy Cruncher? Because like I would like to not have to do the Excel part. Like for me, that's the part that I feel like I kind of have some errors in judgment here, or some things that don't quite align the right way. Sometimes there's just the stress too of like your DK, player ID is not lining up right, and then you import it and it doesn't work. But obviously that's a whole separate thing. Is there anything you would advocate for just doing it straight on Fantasy Cruncher that you would say like people don't do this, but they should be doing it every time out?
Yeah, so I think some people just jump to rules right off the bat. I tend to like look at immediately what like the optimal lineups are. What's the chalk going to be look like in just like roster builds? Like try to see what that's just going to roll out. So like if you just roll out the Stokastic optimal, what that is, and then because that more times than not, those players are going to be the most popular on players in their tournament. And then I'll go back and scroll in the salary and see what pivots are available. Are there pivots who have much greater ceilings? I think a very common one was, I think Marquez Valdes-Scantling on like he would always be priced around 5K, but Jarvis Landry's 5K. Marquez Valdes-Scantling can put up 0 or 30, while Landry you expect him to put on around like 8 or 15. Just like I'm looking for like the high ceiling players off the chalky, less volatile players that I can pivot to in lineups. Now that sometimes makes me remove certain players from player pools, and then. Now, in terms of the filtration aspect of it, yes, there is Excel involved. One easy way to do that is just seeing if you were to roll out a bunch of like, if you were to build like 100 lineups, you can sort by total ownership. But now, like it seems like a lot of sharp people are looking to do a product of ownership. Mm-hmm. I think the team at Stokastic, Sean Zahn brought up a great not argument, but a great hypothesis to why that could be not the best thing to look at product of ownership, just because it might skew your total ownership some that if you're using that as to filter it out. So got to be a little cautious there as well. A lot of people are pushing for the product of ownership. I think there is a fine line of total sum of ownership and product of ownership that I think you need to find that balance between in NFL DFS because of your team stack and the correlation it's providing when the ownership is spinning that out.
So that's some pretty high level stuff. And I actually did see, I think ETR tweeted out something this week where I think Levitan tweeted it out, but with Anthony Amico, I think I've done a ship chasing with Amico, but a very sharp guy over at ETR as well, who does some good data analysis. And he was talking about that too, where I think they had found the biggest winners had pretty discrepancy between the product of ownership and the sum of ownership, and how I think the sum of ownership remained flat relative to like the projections. And what I might be completely misquoting this one, but it was like an interesting thing that did talk about the comparison point. And as we talked about a little bit, I think before the show, like ETR is about as mainstream as can get now. A lot of people are following that pretty aggressively. If they are just football fans, they found it through either Silva or Levitan or whatever the case may be. Is that like, you're talking about a balance between the two? Like, how would you weight that balance? And not to be, too specific necessarily, but like, are you using a fractional amount of the product ownership and then combining it with the sum ownership? Like, what would you look at for that?
Yeah. So just in general, my process of over the years has not been very ownership projection heavy. It's never been that. That's something I'm trying to also improve upon. I don't know what it is because I've never done this, and I've been like studying a bit more this offseason of what that could look like. And part of me, how I figure out my NBA process is 1 week I would test out total ownership, and next week I'd have to test out product ownership and see what lineups are spitting out good. Why is that spitting out the way it is? The only way I've always learned my DFS process is just to test it out. And in week 1, ownership projections on sites, we'll see how accurate they are just because of how big these price pools are. Mm-hmm. I tend to shy away a tad bit, especially for week 1. Just like I'll know like what the optimal lineups are spitting out, and I'll just consider those are the chalky players, and maybe some of them are good. Like Jalen Hurts is an exceptional matchup, for example, this week against Detroit. Does he provide you that super ceiling with his receiving counterparts? like a Justin Herbert in a great environment in Vegas, a Mahomes in a great environment in Arizona, I'd say no. So I wouldn't be keen to playing Jalen Hurts as much this week, even though a great matchup, great cash game quarterback. But going back to the ownership thing like that, that's how I kind of pivot away from chalky ownership, is just like applying the intuition and like the balance between quantitative and qualitative in NFL is such a fine line. So I don't want to get bogged down too much in the ownership process, because every person, I'm sure there's a ton of people who have one ownership process and they just strictly follow it and it probably has worked out for them. I personally haven't been able to find like the adequate ownership projection process yet, where that's probably my biggest weakness in my whole DFS game, is maybe I probably do roll out lineups that are a little too chalky to even have a chance. And why I say to find that fine line between total ownership sun and ownership product, as I want to build up the verbatim thing so I don't misspeak on why I think looking at that issue of multiplying ownership percentage, because I'm going to verbatimly speak what Sean had told our team, was because ownership is independent due to stacking and salary constraints. For example, if Baker Mayfield's 5% owned and DJ Moore is 8% owned, chances are greater than 50% of those Mayfield lineups have more. So multiplying these two would undershoot the ownership compared to the lineup with Mayfield and an unstacked 8% owned wide receiver. So it's a bit high level stuff, but that's why I think that is the one issue with multiplying total product. I can send you this just so you have reference to it.
Yeah, I'd be curious. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely an interesting thing. And I know with the NFL, certainly the volatility being there, like, do you have any ownership caps overall? Like I think we talked about with NBA DFS. We've actually probably talked about on a show. There are guys in NBA DFS where you could put in 100% and not feel bad about it because they have such a likely outcome to occur. Is there any situation in NFL where you would go 100% on a guy, or is it like, players have a cap?
Me
like
personally, I've done this multiple times where I'll play 100% of a player. Where I probably have done it wrong, I've done it with quarterbacks that I'm just in love with at the matchup, and I'll just let it ride. Where I probably have done a mistake in the past is not taking advantage of like that late swap, not late news situation, the Dalvin Cook to Alexander Madison. We had a couple of those where Dalvin Cook was constantly questionable, and then Alexander Madison was underpriced, and I think you just got to jam him in. Sometimes he's just such a great play at the min. You just jam them in. That's where I probably just like take the points there and let your process and your diversification of your position players just do the rest. It sounds a lot easier than the results will show, but I do think it's okay playing 100% to win big in NFL DFS with these top heavy price pools. I do think you have to make aggressive stands at some point, just to give your shot to win big when you have everything go right for you. And I don't think it's the best situation just to have like 25% of like cap of your positional players. I personally don't think that. Maybe there's data out there that will suggest otherwise. I'm happy to entertain and take a look at that. But from a playing perspective, I just want to put myself, when I have my balance of quantitative, qualitative, and my intuition right, I just want to win everything I can, with also like some diversification along the way. I'm not going to come 1 through 10 in my tournaments. I'm okay coming like second and then maybe 100. But still, if I made that aggressive stand, those players do work out. I hope it works out for me. That's how I approach NFL DFS. It's a very boomer bust an NFL process for me, but I just like with so many limited weeks, I just want to shoot my shot a little bit more.
So I have the projections up on the screen from Stokastic, which of course you can get for yourself at stokastic.com, stokastic.com. And of course, check out their YouTube channel as well, where they're doing lots of great content with some of my friends as well. Lots of great work being done over there. I'm pulling up the Vegas totals here real fast. Were you surprised by some of these Vegas totals? Like obviously, the Chiefs game versus Arizona, that kind of feels like a track meet game. Maybe surprising that they're a 6-point favorite on the road, but still over 53. Like that seems fair. 52 for Vegas. But some of these other ones, like 44.5 for the Jets and Baltimore, like I guess, the Ravens, we know historically the public does tend to find them to be a good defense, even if, we'll see what happens this year. Joe Flacco being QB maybe probably wouldn't help. Like Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, New Orleans, Atlanta. I think also what San Francisco, Chicago stands out to me as 40.5. Like, do these totals seem low to you? And if they do seem low to you, just like kind of eyeballing them, like, are you willing to then take like a stack from San Francisco, Chicago, or are you just going, no, because this total's so low that even if they were adjusting for variance and Vegas being somewhat wrong, it's like a 45-point game instead of a 42-point game.
Yeah, and I think what sometimes people do get a little where might get like a little caught off guard with Vegas totals. There's a salary component to this as well, right? Like I haven't looked at what a Trey Lance, a George Kittle stack, or San Francisco is so weird just because of how they operate Deebo Samuel. It's like it's not a very stack friendly team. It's just like with Trey Lance now in the picture, he's going to run a lot for sure, and he's a very good fantasy quarterback, exceptional season long best ball quarterback if you get him at the right value. Now, is he a good DFS quarterback on a main slate where his stacking components are George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, and Deebo Samuel? And when they run so much in the San Francisco offense, I personally don't think so. So, like, I'm like shying away from that team. If I fall on Deebo, Ayuk, sure, in some lineups, I'm not trying to aggressively get to them, especially in a week one setting where I think a lot of casuals, like, oh, they'll be like really excited about Trey Lance, and I think he'll be over-owned. So I'll just shy away in that type of situation. Now, in a situation where can we expose this is I'll look at matchups specifically. What teams have really bad secondaries? How can I get my wide receivers to have that ceiling game when no one is expecting it? Try to target like weak secondaries. And obviously there's a reason why Vegas and surprised Vegas and Chargers are so high. I think that's a really high total just because of how they may operate their offenses. But it makes sense that they were the last regular season, right, where I think their coach chose to like not take the tie, and it was the last game of the season.
Brandon Staley is the most like aggressive coach. Yeah. I know this from our Football Outsiders research, but like he goes for it on fourth down at a higher rate than anybody, I think, besides like Dan Campbell. Urban Meyer is also going for it a lot. But yeah, like, you know, Staley's aggressiveness, I think, is an interesting thing that like you can't quantify it for fantasy, but ultimately like he's going to make possession stay alive longer because he's going for it. Also probably gives you a chance to get more, you know, goal line touchdowns rather than taking the field goal. Mm-hmm. So like those are things that you could probably account for. I worry about that game a little bit because I love the Raiders overall. Like I've talked a lot about for best ball, my Raiders Niners week 17. I'm all about that. That said, this Chargers defense like is deeply improved. They added Khalil Mack too. And it's one of those things where like, if I were going to poke some holes in any of these games, like it's hard for me to see Kansas City, Arizona not be high scoring. But I think there's a world where the Chargers defense is actually pretty good and they just don't have to have Herbert throw for 400 yards to actually get a win. For sure. And I agree with you. And this makes a lot of sense with your thing. I worked with this like a data wizard who's actually a senior at the University of Michigan. I had him skew up some expected quarterback drop back data for me for week one. And Justin Herbert ranks as the number one expected mean projected quarterback drop back this week. So that makes sense with the brand. I have that on my Twitter feed. If you guys want to check that out, I have the first 5 for week one. We'll try to work on rolling out more throughout this season. So stuff like trying to target quarterbacks, they're just going to throw more. It just makes the stack correlation work out for tournaments specifically. Cash games, I'm not really trying to stack. I'm just trying to jam in the best point per dollar value plays and the best plays on the board with good outcomes along the way. Sorry, go ahead. No, good. If you have a point, go ahead.
Yeah, no, looking back at the situation, it's also recency bias is so big in NFL. Like if Mahomes has a bad week in game in week one and he's on the main slate in week two, if he is, I don't know if he is, it's just like naturally his ownership just like will plummet. It's just like people are their recency bias exists probably the highest in NFL than any sport that's left in DFS right now because people's data and process have gotten so sound in MLB and NBA. They're just rolling out good lineups where recency bias is not as prominent as is in NFL. So I still think we don't get to take advantage of that in week one, but just keep that in mind in future weeks ahead. I do think recency bias will be really high.
So we're going to hop over to Fantasy Crunch with these projections now, but I did pull up Trey Lance, and I'm curious how you would view this right here, where we have on the screen Trey Lance's salary, $6K on DraftKings. Stokastic has him as having a 1776 projection here. So great independence for Trey Lance of all things going for him, if not the actual output against that Bears defense that apparently will be good this year. But Tua, you got right there. Kirk Cousins, you got right there. Mac Jones, you've got right there. So if let's say Trey Lance were projected to be 25% owned, let's say aggregate across ETR, Stokastic, Roto Grinders, wherever wherever. Would you just heavy up then on Tua, Kirk Cousins, Mac Jones? Would you go to a different price point? Like, what would jump out to you as the first move you could make?
So I would first try to funnel down, because in tournaments I'm looking to stack and seeing what the game environments look like. I would probably go to Kirk Cousins and give me Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson over Trey Lance and someone else. Like, I think you would agree with me there. Yeah. I don't know if I can do Mac Jones right away, but
that Mac Jones Devontae Parker stack everybody's dying for.
The double stack with Hunter Henry as well. But I mean, those are the type of decisions you got to take. Now, Daniel Jones with the Brian Dable, I really respect Brian Dable, and I don't know if Daniel Jones can be great. Like, can he take that Josh Allen leap? You were the first guy who was truthing Josh Allen. You deserve all the credit for that.
Ryan, I'm glad you know that, because the people who are watching this stream don't know, but boy, that I was on a limb for that one.
There was, I think the Bills were 2 touchdown underdogs against the Vikings in, I think, 2018. And you went full force. Like, I believe in Josh Allen, and since then he has never looked back. So you deserve all the credit for that.
You just needed the faith from me, I think, was really the chip he was looking for. But yeah, like I think Daniel Jones is live. 5K actually might pop up in an optimizer. But let's import this here, and you're going to see the process here. I just grabbed the copy button on Stokastic as I fumble around to click here. I'm going to upload it directly into Fantasy Cruncher. Ryan, tell me as I do this, by the way, is there anything I'm doing wrong right away? Should I not be pasting it in this way? Because I'm ready to be wrong about a variety of things.
I usually just like a backspace and delete those 2 columns and upload. And let's see.
Troy Hairston. Okay, I don't know who that is, but I'm sure he's very important.
Projections are probably going to update throughout before Sunday. So change the slate. Did you put the week 1 main slate?
Oh yeah, I think I selected that.
Okay,
Oh no, never mind. It defaults to the Thursday, Monday. Interesting. Yeah. Nice improvements to Fantasy Cruncher too. And again, Fantasy Cruncher, I would advocate for being the lead optimizer. I assume this is the one you still use for everything, right, Ryan?
No, yes, yeah, I currently still use it. Yes,
and you get that with the Stokastic membership too. So make sure to give that a shot as well.
We have some Stokastic deals, by the way. I might as well plug. So if you go to stokastic.com/promos. You will get, if you use promo code SCRAMBLE, 7 days for 7 days for $7 with Stokastic Plus. And we have some exciting new tools. Like, there's a lineup generator for you guys who hand build, some 1v1, 2v2 comparison builds. Those are very exciting as well. Maybe we can show that at the end of the stream. I think people who hand build, which I think majority of our audience might, it is an awesome tool for you guys to use. So we can talk through that at the end of the show. Now,
So with this process, what would you do as this first step to see the optimal? Would you just put in one, or would you put in a bunch and then just sort by the?
I'll put out 20 to 25. Let's put out 20. Let's do 20.
So we're doing 20 here. You can see the cruncher going for itself. Of course, optimizing right before our eyes. We have no rules set, so it won't stack or anything. But let's see, sort by the most projected. And so this is our optimal according to the Stokastic projections. Jalen Hurts, Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Jacoby Myers, Rondale Moore, Kadarius Toney, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley, Steelers. Anything jump out to you, Ryan, when you look at this?
I do see 2 Giants there in a Tennessee matchup on the road. I have no issues rolling this out in cash. There's a reason why it's the highest projected lineup. All their data, the Stokastic data team has put in long hours. So let's see what the difference between lineup 1 and lineup 2 is, and what the point differential is. Sometimes they're the same. Sometimes the point projection is the same. So that might happen. What's the point differential?
So 0.06, it looks like, and the difference is that there is Kelsey and Marquise Brown instead of McCaffrey and Goddard.
Gotcha. So McCaffrey in a Cleveland Browns matchup, and now we still get Taylor. The first lineup, you have a nice floor with Taylor and McCaffrey, which is pretty solid for a cash build. And here you kind of get a weird little mini game correlation with Kelsey and 2 receivers on the back end of Hollywood Brown. And is that Rondale Moore in the?
Yeah, Rondale Moore. And it feels like here, this is a spot where if you put in, Kyler Murray, I would think this lineup starts to make a little more sense.
Yeah. And that's where you'd have to shift around some pricing here. So when you're hand building, by you just importing Kyler Murray and just changing someone else's, you just like, your lineup is going to be, duplication is not that big of a factor in main slate DFS, but your ownership, like your lineup uniqueness is just going to be so much greater by just adding Kyler Murray, just because of how popular Hurts is going to be this weekend. He's in a great matchup. Everything checks the box for him to be a great cash game lineup. Like, Jalen Hurts is will be my cash game lineup if I am playing cash on DraftKings this weekend. And I think you would agree. Everything just checks the box for him. Exceptional goal line usage for him. I think Mike Clay had him at 14 expected touchdowns on the ground, I believe, last year. So he grades out to be a great cash game play. Now, if you're trying to win a tournament, you got a Kyler Murray in a double stack with a Kelsey bring back. Kelsey, you can argue, will have a very good, probably maybe the highest target share with no Tyreek Hill this season. Andy Reid gets him involved. Now, I don't think the pricing works out. I think the pricing we need to shave down. So someone who is inconsistent, doesn't have the greatest ceiling. So what happens if we change Saquon Barkley?
I would say, but keeping Kyler Murray at QB and not Hurts.
Yeah, but this is like a tournament build. Like if you were to build a tournament.
So I guess CEH seems like he would pop up. Antonio Gibson, Montgomery, Ramondre.
Yeah, let's put in Gibson, Antonio Gibson, and now obviously your point differential has dropped a decent amount. I bet. What's the point differential? I can't.
Yeah, I think it's now down 6 or down 7 from the optimal.
Down 7, but I think we would both come to agreement here. The ceiling is much greater with this lineup. Antonio Gibson in a Jacksonville matchup. Jacksonville is by no means a strong team, but like I have no issues rolling this out in a 3-entry max or like the Millie Maker. I think this lineup makes a lot of sense. A double stack. Rondale Moore is expected to be more involved than he was last year. Jacoby Myers. I don't know if Jacoby Myers is going to get that tough cornerback matchup in Miami, but
is this one of those things too, where like this kind of lineup for like a spy, let's say, where it's a single entry and you're a little bit off from a cash lineup, but making some meaningful pivots? Is that the kind of lineup you would want to put into that?
Yeah, I have no issues putting this in like even a high dollar lineup because I can pinpoint. Can Kyler Murray be QB1? Yes. Jonathan Taylor, obviously, I'm okay rolling. I mean, versus Houston, it was just like free money running backs versus Houston last year. Antonio Gibson, people I think deserves a little bit more chatter with no Brian Robinson. I think can be heavily involved in the run game. The one thing we got to keep in mind this year, Carson Wentz does not check down. He does not check down to the running back as much. He's like anti-check down a little bit. So I think Robinson, can he be the best value running back against the Jacksonville matchup? The matchup works for him. I'm okay with the price tag. And if you're hand building, this is if I was hand building lineups for like a high dollar lineup, this is how I just like look at it. Okay, does he have the upside to give me 2 touchdowns on the ground versus Jacksonville? They can easily win the game. Yeah, game script in his favor. Now on the wide receivers, do these guys have high enough volume? Going to Jacoby Myers, what are some pivots around Myers? Because he's going to be popular at that price tag just because of what's working out here.
Got the ageless AJ Green. We got Jahan Dotson if we want to heavy up on our Washington Commanders. Alec Pierce, that feels like that runs a little bit counter to the Jonathan Taylor, perhaps. Marvin Jones, any of these guys, would they be a meaningful pivot for you that you'd want to take?
I don't mind Marvin Jones as a pivot. Keep in mind you are leaving.
Oh yeah. And a little bit of correlation with Gibson there.
Yeah, there is some inter-game correlation. Now, this inter-game correlation is not something I force in. I haven't studied or back-tested data enough. Inter-game correlation, like opposing wide receiver to the running back. Like, should your Jonathan Taylor lineups have Brandon Cooks? I mean, I don't think so. I think you're completely fine without not having Brandon Cooks in that lineup. But people can make arguments, oh, you need him because of, like, if Taylor's having a great game, Cooks on the bring back. I don't necessarily think that's needed. Double stack with Moore and Marquise Brown, no issues there. Who are the other options in the Cardinals that they have? Important use situation for this lineup to keep an eye on. If Zach Ertz is out that day, it can only help Hollywood Brown and Rondale Moore. Zach Ertz was one of Kyler Murray's favorite targets throughout the season last year. I don't know who the backup tight end is. It's either Trey McBride or Max Williams.
I think it's probably McBride. Yeah. Honestly, either guy could go. Like, McBride's probably the guy who plays by the end of the year, but it could be Max Williams to start the year.
Yeah, Williams is coming back, coming off a leg injury as well. So I think he did tear his ACL last year. That's why they traded for Ertz. So not I'm aggressively going for. Can Travis Kelce Sorry, go
So
ahead.
I'm going to cut you off. Is there anything that you would observe here with like the actual exposures in these optimals where it is 100% Rondale Moore? He's probably going to be one of the chalkiest plays in the week. Kadarius Toney also underpriced at 4,100 now that he's fully healthy. He's 100% here. Like, does that help decide what you do for when you're batch entering, the 150 to 300 lineups you might be doing in a given week?
Yeah, so I think now one thing I will do is like scroll up to the top and see what guys are in that price range. If it's
Okay.
just like we've been seeing this, who's like in Kadarius Toney's price range.
So let's see. We got at the four. Oh, there's okay. Let me show more players here. All right. So we're at the 4,000 range. So we got Tony here. You can see on the screen. I guess we have Pivots and Pickens, who's pretty popular in best ball. Zay Jones, another guy who's started to be a little more popular in best ball. LaVisca, of course, I'm sure Pete's smiling from the heavens right now in Vegas, seeing LaVisca on here. Alec Pierce, 3,900, a rookie. People don't want to take the flyers on him, even though I think he's certainly got a lot of upside here. What did these guys stand out to you? And I guess like, or is it a question then of you just splitting, like maybe you still get 50% Tony, but then you take 25, or let's say not 25, 10% of Alec Pierce, 10% of Zay Jones, 10% of Pickens. Is that anything you would do, or is it just you kind of let the optimizer do the work?
I kind of let the optimizer do the work, and especially when you're building a bunch of lineups, if you want to build a bunch of lineups fast, we can throw in some randomness as well. If you want to, that can definitely change the ownerships a little bit. Now, just based off these stochastic projections, like with week one, with so many people building lineups as they're taking the shit, I don't expect these guys to be super popular. I do think they'll be highly owned. It will be shocking me if we see anyone north of 40% in week one, just because of how big that tournament is and how soft and the competition should be. Like, there will not be 892,000 good lineups. Like, it's just not going to be the case.
Yeah. Also, Brandon pointing out here that Pickens might get some steam if Deontay is out. That definitely seems like the kind of thought process that a lot of people will have, especially as a casual. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like it's hard to imagine Moore and Tony projecting any worse. Like they're like the best values by a wide margin. I guess it's a question I have for you, Ryan, overall in general. Like, are you more inclined to pivot off of a running back, a wide receiver, or is it just relatively agnostic?
Usually wide receiver. Chalky wide receivers. I tend to pivot off. It burned me quite a bit last year. Like I was aggressively trying to pivot off wide receivers. And that will naturally happen to your stack exposures. If you're aggressively heavy on one stack, let's say you are heavy on the Lance double stack for some reason this week, it just naturally, you're just going to have a very, very unique portfolio of lineups. It's just because like, I don't know how many people are double stacking with Lance this week. I don't think that's the case. Let alone, let's like, sometimes it's really tough to fit in a double stack, like the Herbert double stack with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Like, what does that look like price wise? Who are we getting? Let's just see the optimal like Herbert double stack with Keenan and Mike Will.
Let's see. So we'll lock in Herbert. We'll lock in Mike. No, it's not Mike White. We probably don't want to lock in Mike White. Or maybe we do. Joe Flacco gets benched. Maybe there's a world where Mike White is the guy you need in week one.
Revenge game for Joe Flacco, if you're wondering.
All right. So let's see what this one is.
These are expensive wide receivers, right? And
nice price points.
Yeah, you're still getting you're forcing yourself to spend down in tight end. Like almost, if you're double stacking this, almost no lineups will have Travis Kelce. Like, it just like doesn't make like not many lineups if you're running an optimizer. Oh, well, I'm wrong.
You got 3 here.
3, yeah.
But like, I mean, which doesn't look bad. CEH and Kelce in a high scoring game with Moore coming back. Like, that feels like a not bad lineup, even though you're certainly paying some steep price tags for the main stack.
Yeah. The one thing I need to look into, like, I think it's completely fine having, there was a time period where I was like aggressively, like, I don't think I would like, can Mike Williams and Keenan Allen have tournament winning games without Justin Herbert having that upside in PPR setting, 1 point PPR setting? I think it's like, I don't aggressively like to make a rule not to have 2 wide receivers from the same team without quarterback. Maybe that's a mistake that I'm doing. I need to look into that. A lot of people will like not have 2 pass catchers without the quarterback, if that makes sense. Like, they'll make sure if you're having 2 pass catchers in your lineup, it is with the quarterback. So with teams going so passing heavy now, I think I'm okay with just like landing on them. Like, I think I can, if I really want to have a Kyler Murray double stack with these two guys in that great game environment, I'm fine with it. Maybe that's an afternoon only. Like the afternoon only slate is bonkers with those two games.
I feel like you've always been really a late slate kind of guy, the micro slates, the shorter slates where you can get the different exposures and really target an angle more. Is that something that you've made part of your plan of attack for this year, or is that just more like you're playing heavy volume for the main slate and you just happen to play heavy volume for the afternoon slate as well?
Yeah, I think just trying to take advantage of potentially the week one softer competition. Like I think that's what I'm hoping for. Because it'll go away come week 7, week 8. Or that's, I think, being too generous. Come like week 4, it's probably gone.
So let's crunch a full batch of lineups here.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what you would do in terms of rules and things like that, where for me, like I usually set a minimum salary, but like it doesn't probably matter that much, but I'll set it for 4,300. Not probably.
So one thing I do think with a lot of pricing mistakes in week 1, I don't think you need to have a minimum salary.
Okay, interesting. All right.
Because the reason why I say that is almost all the optimals that we saw are near, I don't know what it was, like near 49,000, 50,000. But I do think there's a pathway. So there are probably, I don't know how, I need to like narrow down my player pool, but there's probably some pathway where Kadarius Toney is outscoring multiple 6K plus receivers just because of his price tag and like game environment. So I think organically you'll get lineups north of 49K just in general, just because of projections, how they're ironed out. It's but I think especially in NFL, if you're like spending less than 48K or 48.5 or even 48.9 or 49K like on a regular main slate, I think that's when you can put in the salary cap. I have to look at it by side, but I think if we're going to build out 150 lineups right now, I don't think we'll get many lineups sub 48.5 even. Just the way it works out.
All right, so we won't do that one. Flex position, are we limiting to wide receiver?
No, I think you're fine with running back, wide receiver, tight end. I think that's just naturally.
And then exposure caps. I feel like this is sometimes things people, and again, we're going to be really basic here, guys. So if you're brand new to the Fantasy Cruncher, hopefully you guys can build some good lineups for week 1. After each lineup's created, based on number of lineups requested, do you have any preference?
I just do the first one after each lineup is created.
Okay. And you talked about randomness. What percentage of because randomness is definitely, I feel like, a personal choice thing for some people where you're going to get more weird lineups if you add more randomness. Some people still use classic, even though Fantasy Cruncher has the pro version with a normal distribution. What would you advocate for here?
Realistically, there is like people have processes of like having one for individual players. For the sake of demonstration, let's just roll out 30. Let's just do 33 for sake of speed.
33. All right, change all players. We don't need any thumbs down. Minimum projection doesn't.
And I guess just like for like educational purposes, like the normal distribution curve, like a 33% randomness is, let's say, if someone has a projection of 30, the optimizer will spit out the projected player to have anywhere between 20 and 40 points, I believe.
Stacking and rules. What are we doing on that front where you do have the positional stacks where you could set the rules? You also have the team stack version on Fantasy Cruncher. Are you doing either? I
usually do position stacks. So quarterback with at least 2 wide receivers. If you want to do it, I think, 2 wide receiver, tight end. And that's the double stack, super high correlation. You can certainly just do 1 wide receiver, tight end. But then you got to be careful. If you do 1 wide receiver, tight end, I really don't want Kirk Cousins to Irv Smith just like that. Like it just doesn't make any sense for me.
You want the Justin Jefferson ideally. That does happen in an optimizer where you'll get the KJ Osborne, Irv Smith, and that can pan out, but it's not the most likely.
Yeah. So and then if you want to get more specific, you can make rules saying do not have only just Kirk Cousins and Irv Smith in that lineup.
Okay. So that would be more of a separate rule then, right?
Yeah, that would be a groups rule actually.
Okay. All right, so we got this one. Any other rules you would put in? No running backs from the same team. Do you care about that, or does that not matter? Or running backs from the same game? I know that's something people tend to find.
I mean, running backs from the same team, sure, we could put that in, but I don't even. I think the projections just like wouldn't iron it out. Maybe you get Dylan and Aaron Jones on the same team, but same lineup. And
you wouldn't limit, based on what you were saying before about the Chargers thing with Kyler Murray, you wouldn't limit the wide receivers to be paired. Like you could only get 2 when paired with the QB. You would be willing to take them even if they're not paired with the QB.
I'm willing to take them. I'm willing to do that this season. Now, I'm even willing to even do that more in smaller slates, like the afternoon 4-game slates later on in the season, like where there's less teams to pick from. So now in a main slate, I think you can make an argument you don't need to do that. But let's see what the lineups just roll out based off
Okay.
our
And nothing else you'd put in then as like a core defining point.
Core defining point. No,
like,
I think
no other rules, no other percentages or anything like that.
I think for you can I would actually, you talked about ownership caps. Maybe I do cap ownership on defenses. So if you just want to just like go to the DST column on Fantasy Cruncher.
Oh wait, okay.
Go to DST Fantasy Cruncher, and then I don't see any like outstanding defense. Like we don't get like a solid 2K play. So I would go to exposure on the right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I would let's just make it for the sake of demonstration, no higher than let's just make it 15, just for demonstration, just for these 26 teams in play.
All right, there we go. All right, we're good there. And then how many laps should we be crunching for this experiment?
Let's just whip out a quick let's just chat and like whip out a quick 500, I guess.
All right, so let's see, not 5,000. 500 is generally the max on Fantasy Cruncher unless that's changed in the last few months. And you can see it building before your eyes, of course, moving faster because we have the randomness. If you don't have the randomness on, it will go slower, but you wouldn't normally do any sort of optimization without randomness on, right? Like if you're trying to build actual GPP lineups.
If I'm hand building lineups, I'll have randomness off.
Okay, got it.
If I'm hand building, like if I like an entry in a high stakes build, if I just want to like see what it looks like. So I have like a more like a manual process for that. Now, if I'm trying to get a bunch of lineups out, like for example, right now, like, okay, we're getting a lot of 2 receivers. Like, do I want my whole one weekend to be dependent on Rondale Moore and Kadarius Toney at this high of an ownership? I don't feel that confident in that just because I see also Saquon Barkley. Can Barkley and Toney both have tournament winning games in your lineup? Sure, but does it happen? How many times does it really happen in 100 times? Like how many lineups do we have both? We'll see once 500 is done. We'll see how many lineups have both Toney and Saquon. Like it's going to be a significant number. It's going to be well over 100. And I don't think that happens that often.
Yeah.
So
that is a lot of more coming up. Like, so when you see this happen, Ryan, do you then think about applying an exposure cap, or are you just going to pull out the less is more lineups in the overall optimization here?
So what I will end up doing is I generally want to see what quarterbacks I'm getting. So okay. I think quarterback dictation is the key because we have a very like steadfast rule set in, right? Quarterbacks with 2 receivers. So I'm assuming it's going to be Hurts and Murray up top. Daniel Jones, who we spoke on earlier, is getting a double stack. I'm assuming with because it's coming up. Wandale and Kadarius Toney.
Wandale 3K flat, I could see definitely popping up depending on the projections you're using.
And I think Wandale, if you're hand building a lineup, I think is a great pivot off of Kadarius Toney. Like Wandale's been healthy. Kadarius Toney, kind of an interesting character in his own right. You don't know what you're going to get with him, it seems like. But Wandale 3K in a Tennessee matchup. Henry on the run back. See, like there's a game script kind of makes sense there. Just seeing like what these lineups spit out, and then it's like, okay, now that we got 2, let's X this out. And who are we not getting exposure to? Who are we missing out on based on our ownership projections up top? So we're getting a lot of Hurts, Kyler Murray. Those guys are definitely heavily owned. We're getting some Mahomes. Who are we getting with Lamar Jackson in a Jets matchup? Well, Lamar double stack is always very concerning to me. Yes, he's been throwing more over the last couple of years.
I mean, Bateman and Andrews feels like a nice duo, though. Likely is one of those guys that I wouldn't be shocked to see the ownership start to rise on him because I think he's 2,500 and people have been buzzing about him enough that he'll probably be higher owned than he should be relative to like a DFS slate.
Yeah, and an easy way to just like change up diversification right now. So let's remove filter and let's go to advanced settings.
Okay.
And let's up the uniques. Let's just up it to two uniques.
Okay.
And then let's see what rolls out here. It's going to be, I think it'll be a little less, or if you want to be a more diversified portfolio with those guys, a much lower. We probably should have done maybe 3 just to see, just like to show like the more uniques you have, the more diversified your portfolio might look like. So, and then one thing that is important to see, The reason why, like, okay, you will know if you see you change the view button on Fantasy Cruncher, it will show you the projection it used to spit out. So yeah, projection used. So this is the reason why that lineup is coming up. It's because of that projection it spit out for that player based on the randomness we used. So that's how you know what lineup it is, what's showing up there, and why it's showing up. It's just not completely random. There's the output aspect of that player based on the randomness we chose.
Do you ever sort by like random projection? Because that was something I was playing with a little bit with NBA before we had the baby, and I don't know that it was working out, but I was just curious to see how it would go. And it did make some different lineups that I thought captured the standard deviations well. But is that something you would do, or are you just mostly sorting? I mean, a manual sort, I'm sure it seems like for a lot of what you're doing, but like how do you sort these out and choose your 150 that you're going to go with?
Yeah, no, I'm just like, it's not that I would sort that. I'm just like trusting the randomness and the normal distribution that's already inbuilt in the software. It's really tough to probably build that out randomly. Yeah. So now one thing to see here, we're still getting a shit ton of Rondale Moore and Kadiri.
Yeah, well, Rondale Moore is not going away. He is the Fantasy Cruncher and Stokastic projections are buying in on him being the new Christian Kirk. And I support that theoretically, but it does feel like I'm with you. 4K Rondale Moore seems like too easy of a play. And a wide receiver, I feel like that does tend to bite you in the ass the most.
Yeah. And Rondale Moore obviously has the ceiling to put up. I don't know if he used to return kicks last year. I don't know if he's still going to return kicks, but a little bit difference of ownership now. But when I'm building this out, I got to keep constantly building out portfolios that seem to make more sense. I got to start then. I personally don't like how much Moore and Tony I'm getting. Like, I want to be diversified a little bit more there, right? I don't need to be that aggressive with that pairing. I would like to see what other receivers are there. Potentially, like George Pickens might open up. I would like to get some exposure to him later on. It's like right now, our wide receiver pool is very, very small.
Would you consider doing a just one rule of Tony and Moore, or is that not something you would normally deploy?
I don't think I normally deploy. I certainly think we can build unique and less owned lineups with both of them in there. That would change on your double stack. I think incorporating a double stack already would bring them down a little bit. Another thing that we can change, obviously, is if you want to up the randomness, that will change things quite a bit as well. So
what's about the high you would put in a randomness for that?
Let's double the randomness just to demonstrate.
Okay. Let's see. We're talk about living little. People were saying that you were taking some of the David Kitchen live a little philosophy. Now, if we're doubling the randomness, we are living live.
If we do double the randomness a little bit here, still getting a shit ton of Rondale Moore. But now it's like you're getting a little bit more player usage. 97 players have been used. Can you go back to Crunch 4 and see how many players were used for that?
Yep. We had... Oh, boy, this is taking all my computational power. There we go. 88.
Only 88 players used. So I think it's a pretty big player pool as is with 100. I tend to have higher player pools just in general. That's because I try to diversify my wide receivers a bit more than most people. And I think it's completely fine to like X out a player pools by that Sunday. And then additionally, like this is a little bit more diversified just across the board, a lot less Rondale Moore. I think when I was just looking at the way Stokastic is spitting out these projections, I personally might need to incorporate like a Rondale Moore cap just for him. Like I don't want more than like 50% Rondale Moore. I still want to give my chance if like Rondale Moore doesn't have a good game to still do well. And the reason why we're getting a lot of Rondale Moore is because I think Kyler Murray also grades out to be a really good quarterback this week. And we go from there.
So we have our 500 here with the randomness set to 66% on this one with the normal distribution from the Fantasy Cruncher Pro. What are we doing to get these 500 down to 150? Are we combining some of the crunches? Are we taking just this one that we like more because it has less Rondale Moore? How do we do it from here?
So I think what you could easily do is you can definitely combine crunches. That's something that I probably should be doing, like to diversify a bit more. So I wonder, like, if we were to combine Crunch 5 and Crunch 4, how many duplicates we get? We probably get some, but not much. Let's see what happens. And then,
so should I move I'll move them over.
Yeah, you can move into Crunch 4. Yeah, or copy
Crunch.
whatever's faster. Yeah, I don't know what's faster.
All right,
but I have seen some people just like do this with different game script builds, like, and then combine them, and then we can then filter out via ownership and see what owner, like the less, well, whatever the lowest 150 is in terms of sum, and see what those look like. I know what Alex does. Sometimes he manually just like X's lineups out, and then he'll fall on his final 150.
Yeah, I feel like I remember one of the coaching sessions that were already that were done. Of course, when are they still doing the office hours?
No, I don't believe they are.
Oh,
I mean, they are in Discord. Steve Buzzard does office hours in Discord. So
got it.
23 lineups were duplicated, I believe. So they didn't move over to Crunch 4. So now Crunch 4 should have 977 lineups with 124 players used. So one thing I could do is when I try to filter out, let's go to quarterback.
Okay.
And what double stack just grosses me out here? Probably a Mac Jones double stack grosses me out. I would just immediately delete all 32 of those. Like, I don't want any.
Really? Okay. Poor Mac Jones. Mac Jones getting a lot of love from people who, particularly people who live in the New England area, it seems like.
So I would have to no, and I usually like hand, because I'm not very like good with Fantasy Cruncher, like the inner settings. I would just like delete all 32 that just show up by hand. But
all right, there we go. So
that would take some time.
Delete the 32 selected. All right. So would you do this, just to save some time here, would you do this with every QB then, where you're just like the guys you don't like? So you don't want maybe the Trubisky double stack. You don't want Justin Fields. You just get rid of those guys right away.
Yeah. And then I'll be like, okay, and I'll probably draw the line at maybe a Wentz or having some Wentz in a Jacksonville matchup is completely fine. And then that will like filter out 600. And then I would do it I'll try to see like running backs that are popping up that I have no interest in as well. And then I'll like filter it out that way. And then this is probably, I probably need to incorporate ownership here. It probably just making me land on more chalky lineups because it's like filtering out low on players that aren't projecting great. But then I will find a way to fall on 150. It's kind of a manual process there. But you can definitely use the ownership sum to filter it out.
Would you kill like the top 150 owned right away? Because I know that was what I was gonna say that Alex I've seen do on live stream before.
That's fine. I think that you can completely do. I tend to do that in a more smaller slate build, because I think like with our rules that we've already played, I don't think these are extremely chalky lineups. They're very good lineups with tournament winning upside, in my opinion.
Okay. So let's see. So that was 15. I did not scroll. I thought I scrolled for 150 and that did not scroll nearly enough. Let's see. All right. Select all lineups above. This is also a right click, by the way. If you guys aren't familiar with this on Fantasy Cruncher, you can select all lineups above by right clicking the checkbox and then going from there. So we won't delete 150, Ryan. We'll delete 61. So you still get some of your good chalky lineups, but not the highest chalky lineups.
Yep.
All right. So let's do that. And then from here, how are we paring it down? Because this is going to put us down to like, 884. What do we do at this point?
So there are multiple ways. You can do you can sort by the ownership and then just take your chances with the 150 lowest owned. Like, let's scroll up to the top. What is the lowest owned combination lineup that it's been spinning out?
Lowest owned. I'll switch this to ascending.
It'll probably be some like low on quarterback double stack, maybe. Yeah. It's Tua, Mike Gesicki. That is going to be very low on. Yeah.
There we go. Okay. We got Kyler Murray, David Montgomery, Derrick Henry, Drake London, Brandon Cooks, AJ Green, Hunter Henry, Marquise Brown, the Jets. We are getting a 121.5 projection, Ryan. So we're pretty far off from that optimal. How far off the optimal are you willing to go?
And how far? What was the optimal again?
I believe it was 145.
Yeah, that is pretty far off. I'm a bit more widespread than most. 20 seems a little too aggressive for me, but because it's week 1, I don't think we need to go that much. I think we could do I think 12 or 15 is fine.
Okay. So that would be something then where we would sort by the projection, and then we can cut out all the ones above. What was your marker again? 15?
Yeah, let's do 15. Just probably easier that way.
So let's say 15. Let's do descending.
I mean, 15, like it's the standard. Like, what would be the standard deviation?
Fantasy Cruncher can't handle our optimizing. This is how you know we're building the good stuff, guys. Is when Fantasy Cruncher crashes out on you. That's when you know you've achieved nirvana. Oh no! Hopefully it'll refresh. I feel like the crunches always come back.
But yeah, in terms of like the demo, yeah, The reason why I'm okay with 15 is like week one, a little bit more uncertainty. Like a lot of people's projections are based on some sort of bias based on depth chart or based on some news. So I do think it's okay to have a little bit more widespread off the optimal. If that makes sense. Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Alex has said the 10-point rule from the
Mhm.
optimal projection, and that's definitely been something I've tried to adhere to. But I don't think that's like a must by any stretch. Like, I think that's just a general marker. And like, I definitely have probably gone a little more. I think I've actually gone 10% on the projection sometimes, especially for NBA.
Yeah, I'm a bit more widespread. I'm also I'm also trying to find that wide receiver diamond in a rough. That's just how I play NFL DFS at times.
All
But
right, so we were going 15 under, so we can cut all the ones out from 130, let's say. All right, so let's do that. Select all lineups below. So what I'm doing here, just as we talked about, just removing the ones that are in fact a little bit lower projected than we would like. Looks like it's only 59 lineups, so we're still going to have about 800 and change here. So our final 800, Ryan, which ones get the final rows?
so sometimes with how variance is, if I'm running short on time, I'll just let pick a. Sometimes I know some people just pick a random 150 from this. I think 825 is a bit too high, so I'd keep trying to filter out by player pool and go from there. So at this rate, if you just look, even if you look at the lineups, if we just look down here, is this a lineup that you think you're confident in that looks good in a tournament? I think so. I have no issues rolling this out in a tournament. It's a bit too chalky, I bet. It's a great, I think it's a great like small field, like 25, 30-man field tournament lineup. Jalen Hurts double stack with Brown and Goddard, and you're getting the chalk in here. Like it's like it's like pivots off the cash build that we saw, right? So this is a great small field tournament lineup.
Larry asked a question here too. How long does this process normally take you, Ryan? How much time are you carving out when you are building
I
for?
usually wake up at like 4 or 5 a.m. Sunday morning. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I mean,
Yeah.
you could see here, like this computer I have here. Actually, don't tell Tom, Ryan. This is the one that Osmo bought me a couple of years ago, the gaming PC, which just stayed with me. I think it was a gift, really, to thank me for years of servitude, like a gold watch. But it's definitely like a powerful
Because
computer, and you can see like a little bit of a lag.
another reason, like how my overall DFS portfolio gets diversified, is I play on multiple sites. So organically, I'm just like putting in the players that are best on each site. So, like for example, like there are people who are like, "Damn, I kind of want exposure to, let's say Julio Jones, but he's a good play on FanDuel, but they're kind of aggressively playing him on DraftKings." Like I'll just let him fall on FanDuel for me, and if he doesn't fall on DK for me, there's a salary to this game as well, right? So that's how I get my diversifications, through playing on multiple sites.
All right. So what's the final takeaway here, Ryan? We got our 825. What would be the last step you would take here so I can let you go? Because we're going long here, and I appreciate all you guys hanging out. Of course, if you enjoyed this show, first of all, make sure you follow at RynPak, and also go subscribe to the channel right now. Hit the button down below. Hit the like button too, because it helps out a bunch as I'm trying to build this channel up into more than just me and Pete's hijinks. So hopefully Ryan's giving you some good insight. But what do we do for the final build here, Ryan? Like, how are we pulling these out? Like, is there anything you would avoid in particular with that 78% Rondale Moore still hanging around?
I think in that 832% field, let's just go up, and like I think Jalen Hurts will be the highest owned projected quarterback. I got to make a stand somewhere, and I think I would just like delete all the Jalen Hurts lineups.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, just because like I think because he might just evaporate some of the double stack upside if he's going to rush in a touchdown, which helps him like his floor, but it doesn't help the ceiling of Goddard and AJ Brown. Just because he's still so active in the goal line.
Wait, hold on. I selected all of them. My bad. I needed to select the filtered ones. Only filtered lineups. There we go. So we are going to lose 256 Jalen Hurts lineups here. That'll put us in the 600 range. So we're getting closer, Ryan. How do we get to 150 from 600 then?
And then at this point, since we've combined crunches, that's a good portfolio. If I see any like some random Joe Schmoes that I don't want, I don't think we will. Defenses, it's so random. It is what it is. Like I will realistically, after it's done, like if I'm leaving $800 and if I can upgrade the Jets to a better defense, I would be doing that manually, but it's not that big of a deal.
I don't know what's going on here. This is normally not how Fantasy Cruncher goes, but All right. Well, let's talk it through, Ryan. And we could also look at that Stokastic thing you talked about as well. But these 569. So from here, what would you do to try to get that down to the 150?
Down to 150. A
It's
lot,
hard,
lot of
hard to
the
do it without
ownership.
seeing them. I
Huh?
understand that.
Sorry.
It's hard to do that without seeing them on the screen.
Yeah. I do think one thing we could do is you could easily just pick the lowest 150 because I do feel good about this set with the ownership. You could do that. And then what was the total? I guess we don't have that anymore, but the total.
This all disappeared somehow in this process. And
No, it's all
there we
good.
go. Okay, now we're back. I think it's just honestly when you do that many batches of lineups, it can be a little weird
Yeah.
sometimes. So that's something I've observed. So just keep that in mind if you are fucking around with this stuff. All right.
And
here
one
we go.
thing, hint, hint, it's faster on Mozilla. Just a heads up.
So why is Kyler Murray selected? I definitely did not select Kyler Murray.
And so one thing I would do after this is so we got good lineups. I think one thing I would have seen if we're trying to do the ownership approach, seeing the total ownership sum on the optimal that we spit out, and then I think we're going to get very low on lineups, which I'm fine rolling out on a week one. I have no issues having a Lamar type of situation, but
let's restore that first crunch then and see. So the ownership on now the ownership is gone. Why is the ownership gone? Man, this is not a great showing. I love Fantasy Cruncher. I thank Fantasy Cruncher on the regular. So I'm disappointed that it's not coming through for us in the big game here, but the ownership projections are 0. So that's not going to be the most helpful.
Okay. So that's fine. But if you're running out of time and sometimes if you're building 150 lineups in the Millie Maker and then you have 20 lineups in like the 4 entry max, I would play 170 unique lineups. I have no issues doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's completely fine to do. Before I used to just like all my lineups need to be in all like the contests that I can enter. Then I realized it's okay. And it's going to suck if you have the winning lineup, the Million Maker winning lineup in the $4 and it's not in the 5. It will kill you. It has killed me. Like I have been like devastated from that happening, but it's just part of like process. And I was like, I probably don't land on that lineup if it's not like, if I don't pick 170. Now, where things get a little tricky here is how do we narrow this down from 569? How I would personally do it, I would look at wide receivers who are like I think all 3 of those guys are great plays because of their quarterback. Jacoby Myers, are there good pivots around him? I think there are. And then I would like slowly outright delete players who I don't want. And then sometimes I will fall on less than 150 and then I do it again. And then I finally fall on the final set. So it's a bit of a manual process. Mathematically, people will simulate thousands and thousands of lineups right now, right? People are on the simulation end. And then they will probably filter out based on the contest entry and contest size they're in. And then they'll pick an ownership. They'll do something with ownership projections to fall in that final 150. I personally don't have that yet. And that's the next evolution in my game. I don't know if I'll ever get there, but I'm assuming like the guys like the Whistles Go Woo, your Nerdy Tenor, they have like simulated processes based on ownership projections, filtering out their final 150. So
is there any world where you would play no Rondale Moore, given how unavoidable he's been and that you're going to get lineups that are different right away? If you could keep, relatively close to that projection, is there a situation where you would do that?
Personally, yeah, I think so. But since it's week 1, I don't think Rondale Moore is going to be as owned as projection sites are expecting him to be, just because of how big that tournament is. It's probably so hard to build project out $900,000 field. It's just super hard. So we got to make stands somewhere. Like I won't if I'm capping Rondale Moore, I'm going to cap him at 50%. Maybe if I filter out just Rondale Moore, and then I like take out the 200 most owned Rondale Moore lineups, and then I will naturally just fall on 50% more by doing that. And then I'll fall on like 150 lineups. But then I'll have to do that with Tony. And then like that's another way of filtering down to 150. In this spot right now, where we're at with like the 569 lineups, you could probably make an argument any of these lineups are probably good based off the correlation that we've already inbuilt with the double stack, and like they have the ceiling to win it. Maybe some Rondale Moore lineups, and maybe the pairing of Rondale Moore and Kadarius Toney might be too high. Maybe we need to filter those out a little bit. So what I'm trying to say is, Chris, there's no one right way to filter out 150. I'm saying I don't think there is.
Okay. Yeah. And I know, honestly, I feel like it might have been our pal Eric Lindquist, who again is going to be on the Friday show with me doing ride or die picks. We'll also have Pete's picks as well, emailed in from Vegas. So even though Pete couldn't make the show this week, we are going to have our ride or die competition going on here. But I remember one thing Eric told me, and I don't even know this is for public consumption, but I know he had a lot of success, I believe, in NBA, just like not playing the 3 highest ownership projections guys every night. And I think that was one of the things he was saying, at least at that time frame, right before I moved from LA, that was running well for him. Like that seems like an aggressive take, but especially for NBA. But I do think there's a logic to it for the NFL where like maybe you don't do that with Jonathan Taylor, but you can do that with Tony and Moore and just hope somebody else gets there. And I think that wouldn't be the craziest thing, especially for a week 1.
For sure. And we kind of did that with Jalen Hurts. We just expedited him from Jalen Hurts. So there's so many ways to do that. Like the reason why chalk in DFS is chalk, more times than not, they're good plays. And you're just trying to take the chances against the percent owned that they'll be. Like Derrick Henry's going to be 50% unowned. We saw Cooper Kupp towards the end of the season, 40% owned, 50% owned sometimes, I felt like. And I was like, damn, I can't play Cooper Kupp at that much high of an ownership. And it burned me. And you got to live with the decisions you make based on that. It's just the game we're playing in.
Do you look at something like a standard deviation for that, where if Cooper Kupp's projected for 29, but his standard deviation is like, let's say 4, I'm just making up a number, but like his worst case outcome is still good enough to win you a tournament. Is that something you would consider in that process? Or is it just like you see the ownership and it's sticker shock right away?
It is sticker shock right away for sure for me personally. But sometimes I'm like, okay, let's say let's say if everyone playing was running out the Stokastic like projections, and if Rondale Moore is going to be 70% owned, projected, and if he ends up being 70% owned, goddamn, I'm going to wake up on Sunday after lock, be like, damn, I should have faded him. That's like really high for NFL, right? Because it's so volatile. And like they're going to be, if we're going to run this slate out 100 times, I guarantee you he's not going to be the best 4K receiver 70% of the time.
I got to say, I am shocked at the lack of Justin Jefferson here. That's popping up overall, like 7% Justin Jefferson. And like, I know I've beaten the drum a lot for him with best ball, but like, I really think he's in store for like one of the biggest seasons of wide receivers ever had. Yeah. One thing, 7,800, it's like a tough price point and everybody's paying down at receivers. So to me, like I would want to make sure I get some Justin Jefferson this week. And I definitely will be doing that in my lineups for sure.
Yeah. What I will sometimes even do when I'm building out like the set here, I will lock in Justin Jefferson and I'll give me 100 lineups with Justin Jefferson. Just like do it. Like I want like at least 10% Justin Jefferson. So I'll lock him in just to get exposure to him. And like that's another way of just forcing in guys you want. And there's a reason why you want him. Justin Jefferson can blow up and get you 40. And if you only have 1% of him, you're probably not going to win. Like if you have 10% of him, you just increase your odds by quite a bit. So, and it's okay to force in players that you think have that ceiling. I think it's completely fine in doing so. And Fantasy Cruncher helps with doing that and increasing the speed of it as well.
I love that there are some lineups with Jefferson and Chase. Like, again, speaking of my best ball brain, like this one feels unique, but also very upside. And then you have Aaron Jones as a bring back, like, which, was not something we forced here on the rules. Like, I like this one. And for 4 lineups with Chase and Jefferson, like those are 2 guys that can get you 40 points and can easily break a slate.
For sure. And Kyler Murray, going back to Kyler Murray, he can easily be QB1 and Rondale Moore can hold it down and Ertz can snag you a TD and you're good. Like a lot of the lineups you want to show off on
Ryan, I just want to make sure to make the most of your time. What do you want to show off on Stokastic here?
So if you go to NFL,
is it under tools? Is that the thing?
Yes. Let me just make sure.
Top stacks. There's so many tools. I got to say for Stokastic, really more and more tools by the week, even compared to like when I was there. So I got to give them the credit. I don't know which thing is the option to select.
So click NFL. Just like the NFL, the button in general.
Okay, we got NFL.
Like the NFL homepage.
Oh, the NFL homepage. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Let me go over there. And of course, Ryan, of course, one of the members over at Stokastic, one of the team members over at Stokastic. So please go check them out here. We've been generously using their projections and ownership projections today, but definitely get it in your process for yourself because I really couldn't advocate more for it, having been behind the scenes as well as, being front facing, selling memberships and all of that. Like Stokastic has changed people's lives for the better, I think, in a lot of ways. And I would give them the full credit for that.
Let's go to lineup generator on the right. Okay.
And so this is for the opto or the non-opto bros, the hand builders, but let's see. Yep. Okay. This is pretty intuitive.
And then boom, it spit out a lineup.
Wow. So it's that simple.
This
So
is
does this
based on
count as selling
projection.
lineups, Ryan?
Huh?
Does this count as selling lineups to the people?
Well, you can, if you don't like this is like your lineup dating experience. So go down, scroll down. So if you like it, you can click save. If you don't, you go to the next one, on to the next one. So, and this bar will show you projection high. And then if you want to have ownership higher or ownership lower, like pivots, like that's what the bar is showing on the bottom as well.
So let's discard that one. Oh, there we go. Honestly, very cool tool. Like, I think this is something that, people always want to be spoon-fed some stuff out there. I know that from my days at Stokastic, the YouTubers out there, and you guys here, I think, who are in the chat watching this channel, you probably enjoy doing a little more work to get the results you want. But if you just want to get a nice lineup, you're playing with your friends or whatever, or want to throw in the big tournaments, like this seems like a nice tool to use.
And one more tool I want to show you, back to the NFL page, if you may. So if you go to player compare, right there. All right. So
the either ors have finally been solved.
Yes,
so the host don't have to take it.
So let's say if we want to do a double, like a stack, let's do Hurts and AJ Brown. Let's just see what happens.
I don't think I want Britton Brown. Okay.
And then Kyler Murray and Marquise Brown, the 2v2. I don't know if their salaries are similar, but there might not be similar salaries. It would have been much better to do similar salaries.
They're 13-2 and 13-4.
Okay. So here you can see, it's surprising to see the ownership is lower on Hurts and Brown compared to Kyler Murray and Marquise Brown. Projections are point apart. So if you were debating on the single stack here of Hurts and Brown, or Murray and Brown, the projection would go to the Hurts and Brown side.
Is the head-to-head accounting for which one they expect to be better more of the time?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So there.
Look, nice. I think it's based mainly on projection. It hasn't incorporated ownership yet in part of the data set, but like 1v1s and 2v2s, man, you've probably fielded about a couple thousand of those in your time. So
never answer them unless they're a super chat, Ryan.
Huh?
Never answer them unless they're a super chat. That's the only time we're taking an either or.
Yeah. So this was the reason for that. And then 1v1s, like a lot of like Tony's what, 4,300. Tony versus Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I think there's similar price tags or something like that.
Let's take a quick look at it. Why not? Wow, we've already gone an hour and a half. Who fucking cares? I assume you'd be leaving if you had something else to do. So let's do it, Ryan. Let's show people the product.
I don't have much to do. My busy day was the last 2 days. So
who are we comparing Tony to?
Let's just pull up. No, let's just scroll down. Let's just find like someone in that price range.
Let's see. Oh, that's nice. You could scroll there. Yeah. Okay. We got. These are all QBs. That's why.
Let me just pull up.
Maybe we can compare them to Wandale, I guess, at a cheaper price. It seems like
usually 1v1 would be similar price.
Here, I got it now. Never mind.
Let's do Jacoby Myers.
All right, Jacoby Myers, who's popping up a lot in that crunch we were doing.
I do think that'll be a very popular decision point if people can't miss.
So slight advantage for Tony here, a little more ownership though. So it feels like Jacoby Myers probably has some reason to go that way.
See, looking at the we got 70% plus Kadarius Tony, and look, he's only coming up 12% of the time. So, do we want to be 6x the field all the time in NFL DFS? You certainly can be. I don't play like that really, but you certainly can be.
Yeah, so there you go. So those are some of the tools at Stokastic. Again, stokastic.com, stokastic.com. Great people over there, guys like Ryan, who are legitimately making a lot of money out there. And that's something I've talked about with some of the YouTubers in the world. Like, look, you follow whoever you want, enjoy the content whoever you want. But ultimately, when you are trying to be profitable at these things, when you're trying to use the best data possible, follow the people who are actually making the money and are not grifters either. Like, and I will say that from the Osmo team, Alex, Ryan, of course, Tom, the CEO, Eddie, the founding team there, all the hosts as well. Like, nobody there is pulling the wool over your eyes. So I would say hang out with them on Sunday morning, hear the best takes possible, and understand that ultimately this is going to be a game of probabilities, and it's just about figuring out how you attack it from there. But Ryan, please, the floor is yours to plug whatever you want here to our very influential audience here on Splash Play. So please plug whatever you want.
It's been a great honor. I think I was the first colored person on Splash Play, if I'm not mistaken. Breaking barriers.
Arif, who's on the Athletic Vikings reporter. And if anything, he's one of our favorites. So we are fully about people of color. We've had women on here too, right? I don't know if you noticed.
Okay, all right. fully diversified class.
We'll miss something for everybody here on Splash Play.
No, Chris, this was a ton of fun. I hope we can do this throughout the season at some point as well. It'd be a ton of fun to come back and join you. You can follow me at RynPak. I don't do much NFL content. There's a lot of guys who are well versed who do that at Stokastic.com. Check us out. But if you guys want to find me on Twitter, it's RynPak, RynPak. Thanks so much, Chris. Ton of fun.
Yeah, there you go. So follow RynPak now. Follow me at Chris Spags. Follow at Splash Play Pod. I'll be back on Friday with another of my pals, Eric Lindquist, joining the show. We'll have Pizza Ride or Die picks live from Vegas, though he won't be live. But the picks will be live from Vegas, so that'll be the important part. But come hang out this year. Of course, subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button. We'll see you guys again soon. Enjoy your weeks, and good luck, guys. Bye.